All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about the dark side of Santa Claus, the true story behind the Grinch, and why Chris's dad hates that red-nosed reindeer.
Somehow it is the middle of December, right? Where did the time go? Where did the year go, Jeff, right? It's always fun when you can have this conversation, right? What happened? How is it December already?
Is it fun? Okay.
It seems like it was just 4th of July. Or wait a minute. What, didn't we just have New Year's? And the thing that's weird is, yes, as you get older, the time does, there is a mathematical equation, right? The time does go quicker. You know, when you're 10 years old, right, a year is 10% of your life, right? When you're 20 years old, a year is 5% of your life, you know, so it's just like, and things just...
Keep going, Chris. You learned something back in the day.
No, that's it. That's about as good as I can, you know me in math. I'm not gonna push it any farther than that.
Okay.
But yes, it's December and it's Christmas or for those who celebrate, and we'll talk a little bit about that because we know there's an awful lot of people who don't celebrate and they got ignored, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I think of Christmas, I think of all the things because of when we were a kid, right? Because when you become an adult, Christmas is a completely different category. The Christmas season, most people are thinking about, yay, I can take some time off work or things like that. Or, okay, now I got to go Christmas shopping for my spouse. But as a kid, you know, the things that we were surrounded by at Christmas time, again, as the kids that celebrated or were at least allowed to celebrate, because some people weren't allowed to celebrate their particular religious holidays. I say they weren't allowed, but it starts right off again as with the barrage, and again it started earlier and earlier. Now it seems to start around Halloween with a barrage of like, oh, you know, it's Christmas time because the music starts playing, or you start seeing the decorations, or people start, you know, Christmas shopping and that whole thing. And I remember that very specifically as a kid. Just all the things that just sort of converged at once, but they all really sort of started to me back then, because again, now they start a lot earlier. But once you started seeing the shows, once you started seeing the Christmas episode of a show, once you started seeing Rudolph, Frosty, Santa Claus is coming to town, the Rankin, you know, all those, right? Kind of like those were like the Marionation, right? The Rankin Bass sort of, they were, because they weren't cartoons. Frosty was a cartoon, right?
I will get super nice pulley here for a second, which is good job on Rankin and Bass. That was the production company that made all of those stop motion shows that you and I loved. But Marionation, which would have been the Gerry Anderson productions and all of the
Thunderbirds, the aforementioned Thunderbirds.
Yeah, Fireball XL5 and Supercar and
Davy and Goliath, maybe? I don't know.
Nope. That's a different technology. So
that was Gumby technology. Never mind. That's another episode.
Yeah, so for the one person listening to this that might even give a shit, Marionation, they were actual puppets. They were and they had strings. So they were actual marionettes. Very, very much like Howdy Doody was back in the 50s, right? An actual puppet with little strings on it. And so I think Gerry Anderson was thinking, how can I make these look as creepy as effing possible? And it's really the puppet strings that made them so creepy. But with Rankin Bass, it's the old school method, Chris, where they're little dolls that have wire frames inside of them. And they just do, all right, move his finger half an inch and click. All right. Now he's going to hold the carrot. Okay. Get the Burgermeister Meisterburger over nice here. Pull. Move him over there 1/2 an inch. Get the heat miser and the cold miser.
Ding.
We're going to do that next.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then let's start. Then maybe we start
stuff.
with one like that. And I think Santa Claus is coming to town, which was, let's face it, it's an origin story. Right? Because we had no idea.
Yeah,
all we knew was about maybe Kris Kringle or Father Christmas or any of that stuff that came But you got into Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and hosted by Fred, well, not actually Fred Astaire, right? Puppet Fred Astaire, or Marionation Fred Astaire, right?
Chris, I'm only going to say this one more time. Fred Astaire is stop motion animation. Anything in the Gerry Anderson world, that's Marionation, okay? That is patent, trademarked, copyrighted, so you have to stop saying Marionation, or there is going to be trouble here.
Okay, so I get it. All right, so I probably lost some points for that one. So okay, so Fred Astaire. Let's start with Fred Astaire. So when Fred Astaire was already like an old movie star, right? But somehow we knew, and I don't think Fred Astaire probably was really, really active in films at that point when that show first came on. But Fred Astaire is the host, and we knew who Fred Astaire, just like we've established who Fred Astaire was, just like we've established when we were kids. We just sort of knew who Fred Astaire or John Wayne or Groucho Marx or somebody like that was, even though they were
Burl Ives.
Right. We'll get into Burl in a second, but they were past our prime. Because today, I think, again, the equivalent, if you made Santa Claus is Coming to Town today, would you put in, I'm trying to think of somebody who's maybe, would you make, I don't know, I'm trying to think of somebody who would the host be, if the equivalent of a Fred Astaire?
Right. Someone that was popular, 30 or 40 years ago, right, is what you would put in there. And you can just pick whoever you want. But yeah, that would make absolutely no sense at all.
Would it be Tom Selleck, or somebody like that? Just because I'm thinking of an 80s, we probably should have had somebody more readily available that we would have thought. Would it, somebody who's still alive? But so you had your Fred Astaire, and it gives you this origin story of Santa Claus and how he even meets his wife and how he sort of gets the whole, and all of, yes, the characters that come along, right? The Abominable Snowman, right? All of these things, all of these characters, these side characters, this whole connected universe of Santa Claus. And it just sort of drew us in, and essentially it was, you thought of Santa Claus as, right, the jolly old guy who brought you presents and came down the chimney, and instead it was this sort of dark and complex sort of like, you think Santa Claus, but kids, you really don't. And I think initially it was kind of scary, right? Because it turned out okay. He turned into that jolly old guy, and his red hair, he and his wife both had red hair. I don't know what that was all about. But it just, like I said, the way the way it started and the way it ended were obviously completely different. But again, looking back on it, it was just like, that was probably more traumatic. I don't know if you would make that today. I don't know if you would say, we're going to really get deep into how Santa Claus, came about and how he became who he was. And kids, buckle in, because there's going to be some scary stuff, some scary shit along the way with Santa Claus's history.
Yeah, well, the origin story of Santa Claus and Santa Claus himself, as depicted in the Rankin and Bass world, really, there's two different versions, right? There's the Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which has a very heroic, upbeat version of Santa Claus, who apparently, for reasons we don't know, is somehow fighting against a Burgermeister Meisterburger in a small German village, very similar to a Hitler almost character, where he's trying to demand that he become the ultimate dictator and authoritarian figure, and he's going to tell people what they can and can't do on Christmas and who's going to celebrate Christmas, and he bans it, right? Because it's as I recall, too much joy and too much goodwill, right? Very young Hitler in that respect. And Santa Claus, being the Nazi killer that he is, he ultimately brings love and joy in a nice way, in a very the Beatles' Yellow Submarine kind of a way.
Nice
he
bowl.
Finally realizes that the Meisterburger really was just hurting inside, and he never got a toy when he was a kid. And so if we can just get this guy to find his inner child, I'm sure he'll stop executing people, right? Or whatever he was doing. I never quite figured out.
And let everybody go.
Yeah.
If only
Yeah. Yeah. But that was a very upbeat version of Santa Claus, although a little bit off-putting when you see young Santa with a giant red beard. It was very strange. As a kid, I was like, I'm sorry, what's happening? But then there is grown Santa Claus, the Santa Claus that we all know from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And by this time in the universe of Rankin Bass Santa Claus, he's already the jolly guy, and he's got the costume, and he's in the North Pole, and there's a Mrs. Claus and the elves. But here's the thing. Santa Claus has turned into a sociopathic asshole, right? If you go back and rewatch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you will notice Santa Claus is about the worst human being you could ever imagine, right? He doesn't want Rudolph at all to even be considered as part of the team because ever since Rudolph was a little kid, Santa Claus has been bullying him and just saying, good God, what is that hideous abomination? Take that thing away from me. You should see it. It's not too far from what I just said. He makes fun of Rudolph. He doesn't like Rudolph, and he thinks of Rudolph as this horrible thing that should, as far as Santa's concerned, Rudolph should just be sent off into the tundra and just let him die.
Yes. That's like those people who they can't, they're weak. They're not strong. They've got nothing for me, so they can't help, even build our village or do whatever. And you can take it. So again, there are parallels. But I think even to that, everybody freaking hates Rudolph, right? They make fun of him.
Oh, yeah.
And they tease him. Until,
brutally.
Until he's got something they need, right? Until it's like,
there you go.
Hey, Rudolph, all that other shit we used to talk about and the way we mocked you and excluded you and left you out of the reindeer games, right? All of those things, we need your help, man. And now we like you and do us a solid. And thank God you saved Christmas, Rudolph. And now you're okay. And you're even going to get a girlfriend and grow up down the road and be like a badass, right?
Well, and by the way, for those of you that have a vague memory of that show, and you think that, the way we're describing Rudolph is that he's some kind of a snowflake, pardon the pun, right? No, even his dad was horrified by Rudolph and his red nose and horrifically embarrassed and didn't want anyone to know and made him literally cover his nose up with mud or whatever. I'm not quite sure how that worked. But yeah, so he was just this, you're different and different is bad. And this coming from the lead reindeer on Santa's sleigh and Santa fucking Claus himself, right? And what is Santa Claus supposed to be? Love and goodwill and peace on earth and turning the other cheek. Santa Claus is very, kind of like Christ-like in that way, right? He's supposed to be nothing but love your neighbor as yourself, except keep that effing mutated, red-nosed piece of shit away from me. I don't want to see him again.
Absolutely.
That's harsh, man. That's harsh.
That's right. Again, that's where I think that from that and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which started the conversation, the innate darkness and this sort of like, wow, it's like, this is some serious, it's like everybody's out and we're celebrating. And, there's you remember in between, there's those commercials with like the Santa Claus is riding a little electric razor down there. We can talk about electric razors a little bit later.
That's right. Yeah.
All the commercials, the Harvey's Bristol cream and the clanking of the glasses and everything you see in between and everything you see in your life. And, in school or, everything, Christmas, it's bright and it's cheery and it's so exciting and it's the season and it's to be giving and everything else. But then like I said, it's a different tone. And it's not just with those two, those two kind of jump out to me because I think those were the longer form story and it had, and maybe we kind of, and I think ultimately you kind of gravitated toward it because it had that villain aspect, right? It had the eventually it's like you always got to have a villain, whether it's Lex Luthor or Darth Vader or, Buddy Hinton, somebody like that, all those things. It's like the antagonist, but there were a lot of those, and then even getting into thinking about those two in particular, and then thinking about the animated ones. Let's jump right into Frosty the Snowman. Okay, again, which was this whole mythology about the snow, and they built this snowman and came to life, and the kids were just like so thrilled and so jacked up that they had this walking, talking snowman. What happens to Frosty at a key point in the story?
I don't know what happens to him, Chris, because I was too scared and I had to run out of the room, and my parents would never tell me what happened. They would just call me back in the room after he was restored. So you tell me what happened to him. I don't know.
He melts. Maybe was he kind of Christ-like? Because guess what? Frosty comes back to life. He's resurrected. You know,
he did.
Even though inherently we know that he's a pilot. What's Frosty going to do on the 4th of July? We know he's probably got problems. But so again, this darkness to it, this fear, this sort of like to sort of pull you back out of the moment of like, isn't Christmas great? No, Frosty just died. You know, and all of those, you know, and then jump right into, again, another one, to the Grinch. The Grinch was meant to be like this horrible, despicable character with a heart that was, I don't know, 8 sizes too small or something like that. And the Grinch sucked, right? And what did the Grinch do? He basically, he stole Christmas. He took all the gifts away. He took all the celebration away.
Chris, are you just pulling that from the title, or did you actually watch The Grinch? Because I feel like you're cheating. I feel like this is Cliff's Notes. You don't even know what happened. You just know that it's called The Grinch That Stole Christmas, and now you just come swinging in here. Yeah. Oh, I assume he stole Christmas.
And yes, I've seen it enough. And I got to tell you, it's one of those ones that when you watch it now, doesn't hold up. You know, and again, I think we haven't talked about that, is what, you know, that we used to have the anticipation.
Hold on a second. Are you saying it does not hold up? There's a whole separate podcast, man. All right. Me versus you. Let's go. All right.
A lot of those shows in this sense, because you remember when we used to, hey, it's going to be on Tuesday night at 8:00. Let's get it. You had to, like, you saw it in the TV guide, and if you didn't see it, that's gone. You're screwed. Grinch isn't coming back till next Christmas. You know, you couldn't watch it. Now you can obviously stream it, put it in a DVD, whatever. Back VHS is what we, for our first exposure to that. Those shows, when the Grinch is actually like, there's not really much to it, right? It's like 24 minutes long. It's really actually pretty silent. It's really kind of dreary. And it's just like, man, I know what's going to happen here, Grinch. Just kind of get to it. You're going to, you know, have an epiphany, and your heart's going to grow, and Cindy Lou Who's going to like kind of want to live with you now instead of be afraid of you. All of those sort of things. But again, the darkness of it, and I don't know if the intent was, you don't know how lucky you have it, right? Or, hey, kid, you better keep your shit together. Otherwise, if somebody's come steal Christmas, your snowman's going to melt. Meisterburger is going to put you in an oven. And I probably don't want to go that way. You know, but I mean, just like there were these inherent sort of threats. There always had to be something, and I guess maybe these are the cartoons, right? There's got to be a conflict, but the fact that they were so extreme in that regard, to sort of like, we want you to be happy, sad, happy while you're watching the show. You definitely got to go to a dark place and wonder about, is there going to be a Christmas? Is Frosty just a puddle? You know, is Santa going to figure it out? Is Rudolph going to be accepted? Are we being taught lessons, or are we just celebrating Christmas here?
Well, Chris, you stumbled on to the storytelling model for every single story ever told and every single Hollywood script ever done, which is, we always have to introduce the characters, get used to their world, then something bad happens, they have to overcome it, or there's a complication of some sort, and just as they're rallying, even worse things happen, and now everything falls apart, and right before we get into the third act, we're all at the lowest we could possibly be. Poor little Karen is in the North Pole.
Karen, nice pull.
So far from home because she never should have gotten on that fucking train. And now she's in the glass greenhouse, and there is melted Frosty with the magic hat. And that's the lowest you can go. But thank God, Chris, it wasn't just any snow, Chris. It was magic snow. Obvious reference to cocaine.
You always bring it back to cocaine.
And all the cartels.
I understand story.
Do you? I don't know.
But I just seem, for the content, it just seemed a little bit extreme. Again, watching it through a different lens, I guess, watching it when you're 8 and watching it when you're 58 or 38 or 28 even, as I said, I think that's what kind of sticks out to me because, yes, I understand story structure and I know how it works and I know you've got to have, nobody gives a rip if nothing happens in your story. It can't be a show about nothing, right? Apparently it can. So I mean, but to me, like I said, for considering what we were being told on the outside, right? Go Christmas shopping, decorate your tree, hang your lights, right? All that stuff, all the, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Well, not if you're a melting snowman, it's not. You know what I mean? And I think, and maybe that's actually good because again, we're also sort of taught, or we also should learn that, hey, it's time to be thankful about what you have because there's a lot of people that don't have much, if nothing, or some don't have anything. But I just, again, looking back on it through that lens is when it just seems like, again, it's just like, maybe they just serve to be a real reality check for everybody. It's like, you're going to get your Christmas and everything's going to be okay, but you've got to know how the world works first. And so maybe that was in retrospect, maybe that was genius, but it just, looking back on all of those shows and then all of these shows, the Christmas, every sitcom, right, had a Christmas episode. The ones I think about always go back to, and again, we've mentioned it so many times, is the Happy Days Christmas episode when Fonzie had nowhere to go and made up this sort of fake family that he was going to take a bus and go to Waukesha, and he kept solving some of their problems, like their Santa didn't work and their lights on their tree didn't work. And even Chuck Cunningham was there because that was before he was just written out and never referenced again. So all of this sort of thing. And it was just like, and again, it's like, look at Fonzie, you don't have presents or you don't even have a family, but you've got the Cunninghams and that's all you really need. And Christmas is about that part, right?
Yeah, I gotcha.
So I guess you saw the messages, and so maybe it was okay. And again, that's because we were all there anyway. We were going to watch it regardless. But it just, to me, like I said, the I guess you can't have light without dark, and nothing was ever more apparent than when you got into those shows that started, a couple weeks before Christmas. As we say right now, we're about a week out before Christmas, and then culminated by Charlie Brown, right? Which once again, Charlie Brown, because he's a dismal failure, can't be counted on even to get a tree, gets like the tree that he feels sorry for that looks like himself, right? And takes it back to, again, the kids who are now, for just like every other holiday, there's no adults around. They celebrate it all on their own. Effing Linus gets up there and tells everybody what Christmas is all about. And somehow Snoopy's got it going on in his doghouse when nobody else is around. But all of those things that we, laid out and all those things that we expected kind of came in to, that last couple of weeks of Christmas that combined the shows with the shopping, with the decorations, with the vacation, with all of those things, and it was just sort of, not to try to make it a pun, but I'll package together in a nice tidy bow. And that was Christmas, I guess.
No, you're right. As a kid, watching something that you think is going to be a fun holiday show, whether it's Peanuts or Rankin Bass or an episode of your favorite sitcom, and then it does go kind of dark, at least for your 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old mind. Yeah, and you can actually have nightmares and get kind of traumatized by it back then. But ultimately, that is real storytelling. But speaking of that, I would like to rewind for just 1 second and do a super deep poll on the Grinch that stole Christmas. I was out in La Jolla, California with my sons, and we were in a kayak on a summer day with a tour guide, right? They would take you out by the little La Jolla Cove, and you see the seals frolicking, and you can look at the cliffs. And one of the things that you can see there, Chris, to this day, is Dr. Seuss's beach house. And when I say beach house, please understand, I don't mean a house that's kind of near the beach or all he has to do is go across the street and there's the sand. No, this is literally on the rocks at the base of the cliff. And if you step off his balcony, you would fall into the water, right? So to this day, nowadays, that's illegal. You can't have a house that close to the water. So it's just this sort of anomaly. I don't think anyone lives there. I'm not even sure that it's architecturally sound, but it does sit there to this day, maybe as a monument to Dr. Seuss. But my point in all of this, those that are local here to Southern California know that in the city of La Jolla, there is also, calling it a mountain is not the right word. It's more of a hill, but Mount Soledad, right, which is really just a hill that overlooks La Jolla, where very, very, very rich people live. These are multi-million-dollar homes and windy little roads that go up it. Was my point in all of this? Dr. Seuss was a partier, hardcore. Even though he was married, he liked to whoop it up on the weekends, right?
Allegedly.
So he had his house at the top of Mount Soledad, and he also had the little beach house on the water, and he would party with all of his friends on the weekends. And guess who was not happy with that, Chris?
Mrs. Dr. Seuss?
That's right. His wife did not like this. She did not participate. She was not okay with it. And by the way, don't want to make her the enemy here. Maybe he was a total dick. I have no idea. But the Grinch is completely about his wife, and I think later ex-wife, looking down on him, frowning and saying, "How dare you? How dare you have fun down there by the ocean with your cocktails and your devil-may-care attitude," and whatever else he was doing.
That is amazing. So the Grinch is based on an actual person.
The Grinch is based on a failed marriage. How's that, kids?
They couldn't call it the bitch who stole Christmas. So he changed it. I would watch that, actually.
That might have been the working title, the original
that is an
title.
Outstanding pull. And one more thing about the Grinch before we move on. Who narrated the Grinch?
Boris Karloff, who the only other time that I remember his voice being part of pop culture was Monster Mash, but that wasn't really him. That was somebody doing an impression of his voice. Yeah.
Imitating him. Right. And who probably peaked, again, I know, and we're talking about cartoons that came out before we even actually, these are all from the late 60s, so we obviously watched them growing up.
Well, yeah, Chris, it goes without saying that old people, as we've talked about a million times, old actors, again, were part of our youth in terms of cartoons and television and TV shows. They really, went decades with just old people from the 20s and 30s and 40s and character actors and old singers and stuff like that. And we just thought it was part of our youth to see these guys on TV. But when you go back to these different Rankin and Bass episodes, right, these stop animation holiday shows that we all love, I do have to go back to Rudolph again for just one quick second, because we were just talking about how pretty evil Santa Claus was. I mean, he was a dick, kind of a fascist, He definitely thought that Rudolph was different. And it wasn't just, hey, you're a little bit different. It was, hey, you're different. Get the F away from me. How dare you be in front of me? Your dad should be embarrassed. Get this abomination out of my sight was the lesson. And so much so that Rudolph felt he had to run away with the other elf who really just wanted to be a dentist. But listen, don't fucking come to Santa Claus telling him that you have other aspirations. He is not having it, man. Santa Claus does not want to hear that you have other dreams. He is there running a factory. And let's be honest, it is slave labor of the highest caliber. In fact, these things are genetically bred as slaves for Santa Claus. And you just fucking make toys, pal. That's your job. All right? I don't know where you got this dentist thing from.
I think I've stopped laughing enough to comment. At number one, yeah, 100% spot on. Get your ass back in that workshop and start making some toys, right? I don't want to hear about your goals and dreams. I don't want to hear, and a dentist is just kind of arbitrary to begin with. It was like, I really want to be a dentist. And everybody knew it. And as for the rest of those, worthless ass, island of misfit toys, it's like, no, you know what your purpose in life is, whether you like it or not. I think you could draw parallels to Santa's elves and the Oompa Loompas.
Oh yeah.
They had zero. The thing about them is they even had zero, less individuality. Is like, again, get your, wonka ass looking character yourself in your overalls and your funky hairdos in there and make the best goddamn candy in the world.
Oh, nonstop, by the way, 24/7. Yeah, I get that in Loompa Land, right? It inferred that they were being, eaten by vermicious canids and womp doodlers or whatever, very Dr. Seuss, but there were these, imaginary creatures. Yeah. He saved them, in quotes. I love that. And I'm sure they all thought that they were going to be brought to another island somewhere where there weren't vermicious canids, but instead he's like, welcome to my factory. Get the fuck to work immediately. Here's how you make chocolate.
Exactly.
Do it. And stop. Don't ever stop doing it.
Exactly.
Ever. Stir the river. That river has to be stirred constantly. Okay. Well, anyway, that's just one lesson from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which is Santa Claus is not having it. He does not like individuality. And by the way, let's not forget, that is the same episode or whatever, holiday show that had the island of misfit toys,
right?
Because Rudolph and the elf Hermie, right? They end up at the island for misfit toys. And what is that, guys? That is an entire island populated by these poor toys that just had one little flaw. They weren't perfect. They didn't make it through Santa Claus's authoritarian checklist. And Santa Claus said, get them the fuck out of here. In fact, put them on their own little island or whatever. Put them at the what is it? I guess the North Pole. No, the South Pole. I don't know where they were. But dude, these things were as far away from, I don't want anyone to ever see them ever again. That was Santa Claus's orders. Let them live alone in misery in the frozen tundra so that no living creature should ever set eyes
Something
on,
like that.
What was it, a train with square wheels or a squirt gun that squirts jelly? My God, what a horrific mutation. How could we ever show children these abominations? Anyway, I'm just saying Santa Claus was a dick.
And apparently with really good PR, right? Because nobody, we rushed to see him. People sent him the letters and their lists and took pictures with him at department stores and he was, you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout, and I'm telling you why. Okay, and it's just, but however,
because Santa Claus is an abusive asshole and he's probably been drinking. I'll be honest. Mrs. Claus is a little worried about his mood tonight, so just shut the fuck up and hope you don't get on the wrong side of Santa Claus, is what I'm saying.
He's a vigilante, essentially, right? It's like, as long as you do what he says, which is you'll be rewarded, but step out, get out of your lane, right? Step up and question your basic existence, which is what Hermie did. And no, right?
He sounds like an OCD narcissist, like a borderline sociopath, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that fits. Yeah.
Like I said, to learn that dark, gloomy backstory, and essentially, it all worked out, but did it really? You know what I mean? Because again, ultimately, it was a lot like, I mean, when I found out that they're okay, for any of our younger listeners, which I know there are none, when I found out, very young listeners, I should say, when I found out that there was, in fact, no Santa Claus, okay, and much like you, I was the youngest of three. I don't know if you had the similar experience where I was just flat out told, and this was the first of, I'd say, many instances where my older siblings tormented me for essentially no reason. But they told me there was no Santa Claus. Okay, and I was about 6. All right, when you're still in that sort of that window of like believing in Santa Claus. And at the time, it's like we lived in a house, and they basically put him on trial and said, "Look, we have no fireplace because the first little small single story house I lived in for the first 6 years of my life had no fireplace. We have no fireplace. How does he get in? Why does mom go Christmas shopping? What's all this wrapping paper about?" Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but ultimately, you still get presents, don't you? It's just like, yeah. So ultimately, it's not really a big deal. I'm pretty sure they didn't use the word ultimately. It's like, no. And so that was it. So it was kind of this very sort of matter of fact, just like, yeah, in the end, I didn't give a shit because I still got Christmas presents. And,
I'm kind of wondering why your siblings felt like it was a court case. They could have just said, "There's no Santa Claus, by the way, deal with it," and walked away. But they're like, "And let me explain. Have you ever noticed?" It's like they're like this sly Southern lawyer in a court drama. "Your Honor, now there's a claim that there's a Santa Claus, a magical man who goes down the chimney. But I give you a gentleman who has no chimney, and yet the presents arrive. Now, I'm not one to say that there is no... What were they doing? Why were they creating such a horrific case against him? Why not just peel the Band-Aid off and just say, "Chris, there was no Santa Claus"? No, they got to drag you through a deposition, evidence, a prosecuting attorney. Like, what the fuck, man?
I wish I knew. Okay, but again, there's probably a lot of things I wish I knew as it came to the dynamics of that relationship, right? So...
Well, that pants have two pant legs is one thing. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I could just draw it back parallel to you in the sense that if you make it, if not a courtroom drama, make it an episode of Columbo going, I just got one more question. Yeah, the house, there's no fireplace in the house, correct? So whatever. That was how,
We're to believe that Chris was never naughty, that he just somehow dodged the list entirely, that there was no gray area. Okay, well, I think we can see, Your Honor, based on the circumstantial alone.
Right, but we still got to just sort of, wrap ourselves around it at that age, and even as we went older. And, I think at that point in time, and I don't know about you, I think definitely, it took me a while before I met kids. I don't think I met, and actually it wasn't on that block. It was when we first moved to San Carlos, and I met kids who were, dun, 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 Jewish kids, okay? And then going to public school, because I'd spent a couple of years, not many, in Catholic school, where I met more Jewish kids, friends who were Jewish. And at the time, though, and so then I kind of realized, it's like, oh, I understand it. Yeah, they don't celebrate Christmas. But at the time, I in retrospect, and I've never really had any discussions of with Jewish friends about this, but at the time, it was pretty shitty because we had Christmas vacations, right? There were like Christmas specials and Christmas sales and Christmas caroling, and even at public school, there were wreaths and Christmas trees. And eventually, yes, it took decades for all of that to sort of like, you know what? This isn't really, but again, it took decades. We grew up with that.
Well, Chris, you're forgetting that the Jewish kids did have one thing in the public schools. They had a song that they were allowed to sing that we all had to learn. They gave them one token song for the Jewish kids. A dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay. That's it. That's all they got. That's all the Jewish kids get is the goddamn dreidel song.
We got a dozen Christmas specials, right? We have, yeah, you're absolutely right. And then maybe we had decorations. Maybe if you were lucky, you got a menorah, right? Which was about the size of the palm of your hand. It was just like, here's your wreaths, here's your trees, here's your ornaments, here's your mistletoe and holly, whatever the hell you had.
They didn't have like a Moishe, the menorah donkey. There was no Rankin and Bass version for the Jewish kids. Nothing. No. Oh, and by the way, Chris, count yourself lucky that there is no actual Santa Claus, because if it's the Rankin and Bass Santa Claus that I'm looking at, you don't want there to be a Santa Claus. Thank God we dodged that bullet, that there's a supernatural being who's just this total fascist. I think it's a good thing we don't have the Santa Claus. And by the way, I know I'm going to let go, Chris. I promise I won't go back to it one more time. This is just the last time, I swear. But that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, just one more thing. I got to get one more thing in there. The abominable snowman, right? That they found out there in the wilderness. Yukon Cornelius found the abominable snowman.
Right.
And as you remember, the abominable snowman is going to kill everybody.
Hermie.
But what do? Hermes, the dentist elf, Hermie, yanks all of his teeth out. And that's like the lesson of, hey, everybody, look what we did. We yanked out all of your teeth without your permission. You were a wild creature living out there on your own the way nature intended, maybe the last of your kind. I don't know how many abominable snowmen are out there. And now you can't live in nature anymore. You can't kill anything or eat anything or survive on your own. Now you're just permanently on welfare, and you have to just get handouts from anyone that will give you a handout. And the lesson is domesticate anything out there that seems to be a threat or kill it. The end. What the fuck lesson is that? They took his teeth out, and that's supposed to be good for me. He's like, oh,
Do that again.
Yeah, he's super excited that he doesn't have teeth anymore, and everyone loves him now that he doesn't have any way to eat food or live in the wild ever again. Yay, we did that. We did that for you. You're just lucky. You're just lucky we didn't fucking kill you, is what you're lucky, sir, is the lesson there.
He also didn't have to worry about, getting cavities.
Oh, and let's not forget, he has a job now, Chris. He has a job. Remember what the job is?
He's working security at Santa's. I don't remember the job.
They want to make him feel better because he no longer has any teeth in his damn mouth, right? So they let him hang the star on top of the super tall Christmas tree. And Chris, that's his new job. Hey, congratulations. You are now officially fully domesticated, and now you can just sit by that tree all year long, and once a year, I'm going to hand you a star, and you stick it on top, and then shut the fuck up again, because I don't want to hear from you again after that. Do you understand? You toothless idiot.
He's probably not going to make it to Valentine's Day without teeth, let's face it. So he probably only has that job for, because he'll have starved to death by then, maybe. And also,
right. Yeah.
In the weird roundabout sort of way, it was sort of like, hey, Hermie, all right, you got to do your dental thing. Now get your ass back into that workshop.
And how sadistic is Hermie? He's like, oh man, this is going to be good. He totally dextered that mouth, by the way. Like it's too much. It's just like Hermie enjoyed it way too much, man.
Like Laurence Olivier and Marathon Man, right? He really, really wanted to, it gets just like, yeah, hey, Dustin Hoffman, I'm going to rip your, I'm going to use a drill without Novocaine.
Double pull. Nice.
Yeah, but see, there may be no more painful. See, the thing is, though, is as far as Rudolph goes, okay, and again, the song, everybody knows the song, right? Everybody, again, we've all used a reference of it. I've left out of the reindeer games, okay? We know, all the rest of that, how that goes, right? And again, well, one more thing, Gene Autry, right, sang it. Again, Gene Autry was old when we were born.
Oh, is it Gene Autry singing that? I didn't realize it was. Okay, all right.
Gene Autry originally, yeah. I mean, I think lots of, no, I'm not talking about Chris Isaak in this case. But, but to take it home, to get just a little bit closer to around my, Rudolph, there was a special amount of hatred for that song in my house due to the fact, and I don't know if you know this because you never met, since we met, you never met my dad, I don't think,
no.
In high school or anything like that. My dad's name was Rudolph.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
And my dad was probably about the same age I found out there was no Santa Claus, around the time that song came out. And as you can imagine, that was a bit of a problem for him. Basically for them, and till basically for most of his, if not all of his life. And then to top it all off, there was a time when he found out, and so he went through life basically hating the song, sometimes hating Christmas, sometimes hating Gene Autry, and then somewhere, somehow,
a lot of hate. Okay.
Some article, my dad had a lot of pen.
He had a
anger.
list just like I do. I get it.
Right. Heart of gold, but he had a level of anger that was, if not gold, maybe platinum.
Rudolph was his Adam Levine. Yeah. That was his Ryan Seacrest. I got it.
Right. And so then at one day, randomly, out of nowhere, he sees something on TV, or he reads it in part of an article, or somebody mentions it like on the radio, that the song was originally written as Randolph, the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And at the 11th hour, prior to recording, Gene Autry himself changed it to Rudolph. So my dad was this close, as I hold my thumb and index finger to get barely apart, to escaping the ridicule, the teasing, the taunting. It had it come out as Randolph, the Red-Nosed Reindeer. But it didn't, and he didn't. And when he found that out, let's just say it all came back. And he hated Gene Autry even more. And he hated that song even more. And so that's something. Wasn't played a lot around my house. Let's just say that.
That is so interesting. Man, if there's anyone that can understand an irrational dislike for someone that never did anything directly to you, but you just don't like them, I can. So I love the fact that Gene Autry was somehow on his list of people that he doesn't like. That is super funny to me. That's awesome. Who else was on your dad's list, do you think? What other, everyone has a list of irrational things on there, right? That piss them off, but, or just unnerve them or annoy them. Oh, okay.
Nixon,
Oh, well, that goes without, yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, there you go.
Sandy Koufax. They're mostly...
Don't tell me he wasn't a John Wilkes Booth fan. If you tell me he didn't like him, boy, I oughta...
We never had that discussion, but I don't know. I wish, again, there's a lot of things I'd like to talk to him about if he were still around.
You have made it sound like your dad obviously is a great guy, but you have, though, hinted or alluded to the fact that your dad did have a number of triggers, for sure, when it came to things you don't want to do at the house or say, just like all dads. He had certain things that are like, oh, man, don't even start, Chris. No, don't even do it. Nope.
I think most of our dads in those days, they all had those triggers, right? And the get off my lawn is a cliche, right? But it was absolutely, like most cliches, it's born out of truth, right? Turn that down, stop doing that, don't touch that, right? And then I think, and I saw this growing up, and I've definitely seen this as being a parent myself, and there was a lot of dads we were all afraid of, right? And I think, and my dad kind of, he again, heart of gold, really soft on the inside, but if somebody was a little bit afraid of him, he was okay with that. He relished that.
Yeah.
I had somebody come tell me after, after the wake, whatever, after his funeral, an old friend saying it was just like, God, I was afraid of your dad. And he's like, I still am. And it's like, yeah, me too.
Well, Chris, your dad, though, didn't wear a cowboy hat and carry a gun in his boot at all times, did he?
He did not.
Okay. Well, we should have a whole other podcast episode on my dad. Because, it's a good thing that he didn't have daughters. I can't even imagine somebody coming to our house and seeing 250 guns, including an Uzi 9mm, a 45-70, and a 45 auto mag just sitting there. And in the garage, ammunition, gunpowder, and reloading equipment so you could make new bullets, which is oftentimes what I was doing in there. Hello, Homeland Security.
We definitely could have, there were no cowboy boots, but we definitely can have a guns and ammo / concealed weapon episode as far as our dads go. Apparently, we'll have to compare some notes on that.
Things were different back then, but yeah, we'll have to dive into that. So, well, and by the way, I would like to maybe wrap up on this concept, which is since we dove deep into Rankin Bass and all the weird shows that we watched back then that were during the holidays, and we didn't even get a chance, Chris, to really dive into the holiday shows that were like the variety shows or the Christmas version of whatever sitcom that we used to watch, right? There was always a holiday or a Christmas version of it. Really great Twilight Zone episode, all kinds of homages to Santa Claus that were back in the 70s and 80s, obviously. But
all the commercials.
There was also the Rankin and Bass adventure, which was the year without a Santa Claus, right? So this one, as you recall, got super acid trippy. This one was an LSD trip times 10 because, as you recall, that one had the heat miser and the cold miser and just all kinds of weird trippy stuff with just like really awesome, crazy musical numbers. And you're just like, what the hell? Who wrote this script? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love it, but that is a strange effing tale, a big departure from the normal canon that would be the Santa Claus story.
It's great that we could have a "What were they smoking" in the writers' room?
Oh man, that's so Lidsville HR Puffin stuff moment there. Yeah,
built part of Christmas. Yeah, I like that we could make that connection. But yeah, of course, again, by the time I was 6, it was every year was a year without Santa Claus. But again, I still got the shit under the tree. So let's just move on. And then they just figured out other ways to torment me. But again, future episode there, or miniseries.
I wouldn't feel good if I didn't mention, Heat Miser and Cold Miser.
Absolutely.
My two favorite guys. Well, whether we want it to or not, the holiday is approaching. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic at all. I like Christmas time. It's nice. I just like the holiday spirit. I really do. I do enjoy, pretending or at least believing that people are a little bit kinder here and there. Although it also leads to a lot of extra stress this time of year. So I don't know. It's a mixture, but it's nice to believe for just one moment that there could be a second or two of peace on earth and goodwill towards men and a little bit of forgiveness, maybe holding the door for somebody or helping someone with their groceries or being kind of nice that day. Nothing could be wrong with that, right? And
to top it all off, it's also nice to have an excuse to eat a lot and drink all day on a Wednesday and not have to worry about it, so we don't get a lot of opportunities of that. So, or Thursday or whatever random day of the week Christmas may fall on. So,
Chris, one last question for you before we head out. And this goes in with, candy corn, right? For Halloween. It's always the big question. Do you love it or do you hate it? There's no in between. I'm going to hit you with this on Christmas, eggnog. Yes?
No, effing disgusting.
Okay.
I don't care how much booze you put in it. It's just the texture and just sort of the way it go. Yeah. The consistency. No, not at all. And,
well, apparently this would have to be a whole separate podcast because Chris, I don't just like eggnog. I love it. And I totally get it. It has a weird, creamy, almost buttery texture. It's very, very sweet. I totally understand why it would just make someone gag if that is not your palate or your flavor profile. But dude, I have to limit myself. I could sip, I think, on eggnog for weeks at a time. If you would let me, I would just end up, my 600-pound life. If you just gave me an unlimited supply of eggnog and a straw, I would be in trouble, man. Well, I'd be dead. I'd be dead in a couple of months is what I would be.
It's good for you that it's seasonal, right? And you just can't go down to in the middle of March and get some.
Is it seasonal? I mean, can I not get it? I mean,
not really.
I shouldn't even be asking that question. In fact, I'm going to not even think about it. Okay.
I mean, you could probably find it online with your contraband Christmas bulbs.
That's right.
You just can't go down to, Alpha Beta or Food Basket or any store that actually exists now, and just get it like anytime you want.
Well, I'm going to have to look that up. A supplier for C9 ceramics and eggnog. Got it.
Okay, then I had to, again. I know we need to wrap up, but I'll then fire one back at you with the same yes or no question as a Christmas treat. Again, you only really find them along the lines of candy corn, candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in or are you out?
Oh, I'm in completely. I love candy canes. Yeah, absolutely, man. In fact, I love candy canes so much. I mean, I don't eat them all. I don't mean that I'm eating candy canes all day long during Christmas time, but I do love that flavor. And that is one of those things that you can see year round, right? Because those little mints that they have at restaurants.
Essentially, yeah, the mints that you don't want to touch.
Right. Well, it's the same flavor. And I'm telling you, man, that is one of those things. If I eat one of those red and white striped mints at a restaurant, the candy cane mints, instantly I'm transported to Christmas time, and it's just a really good, warm, fuzzy feeling. And it's one of those tastes that just instantly brings me to Christmas or the holidays. So I'm in, man. I love them. Do you hate them?
I thought you were going to say you were immediately transported to the ER or something because you'd picked up some sort of
That's right.
E. coli from a wrapper of a candy that somebody had like done some...
or a peppermint patty commercial to a frozen tundra.
Yeah, I kind of half in and half out. I mean, if it's laying around, I'll eat one, and I won't like seek one out. What I might like, but if there's those, the green and red wrapped Reese's peanut butter cups or Rolos, or Hershey's Kisses, I'm all over those. But I will eat a candy cane almost by it's kind of laying around. Somebody gave it to me. I won't finish it. I'll get to a point where it's getting kind of sticky, and you're taking the wrapper down, and now it's on my hands, and then it's just like. So it's never like, oh, I'm done with the candy cane. It's just like, I'm done with the candy cane, and the rest of it goes out.
I think that's most people, though, Chris. I don't think many people finish the cane. I think most people play with the shaft, and they just leave the hook at the end there, Chris, for someone else to eat. Or they just bite the hook and leave the shaft. I don't know. Did we go in a weird area? Sorry. Have we drifted here? I apologize.
I'm not going to touch your preference for the shaft or the hook. I think we'll leave that up to the listener's imagination.
All right, then.
Then maybe it's time to go. I still got a little Christmas shopping to do at this point. So,
all right. Well, let's get going then. Chris, what do you think, man? Until next time?
Till next time, Jeff.